Hello, I'm the Nostalgia Critic. I remember it so you don't have to. Now, I'm not an animation historian or anything like that, but I don't think I need to be one to tell you that animation was at an absolute low point in the 80s. It was a low point for cartoons, and it was a low point for animated movies. As someone that was born in the early 2000s, I am quite simply astonished at how much garbage came out in the 80s, how much slop came out when it came to animation in the 80s. That's not to say that there wasn't any good animation at all in the 80s, because it was there. There were good animated movies and cartoons in the 80s, but very few and far between. Like when you look at animated movies, for example, there were good animated movies in the 80s. You had Don Bluth, you had Studio Ghibli, Akira is like considered one of the greatest animated movies ever made. Disney went through a slump for most of the 80s, but they were able to get their together by the end of the decade, and they went on to have an amazing 90s. There were good animated movies in the 80s, but there was also a lot of trash as well. A lot of corporate manufactured garbage. You had stuff like not one, not two, but three, count 'em, three Care Bears movies. You had stuff like My Little Pony the movie. You had that sort of thing. And then when it comes to cartoons, it's like, oh my god, do not even get me started on the cartoons. The biggest problem with animation in the 80s was that a lot of it was very corporate manufactured. There were no cartoons in the 80s. There were only products, and that's it. Glorified toy commercials disguised as cartoons. Shows that were made with the sole intention of selling toys to kids. Even the alleged classic stuff like TMNT and He-Man and whatever, they're not exempt from this. The underlying message of the 80s TMNT cartoon is buy more products, consume product, buy our toys. There's no artistic value in it whatsoever. It was a hideous practice, and I am glad that it no longer exists, and if it still exists, it is nowhere near as bad as it was in the 80s. I remember a few years ago, there was this Thundercats cartoon that came out, and a lot of people online were criticizing it, saying that the show looked awful, it looked bad, and, I don't doubt that the show is bad. I'm sure it is a bad show, but at the same time, it's f***ing Thundercats. It's not like Thundercats was ever good to begin with. Oh my god, I can't believe they took my soulless, corporate manufactured, glorified toy commercial disguised as a cartoon that I only pretend is good because of nostalgia, and they ruined it with that godforsaken CalArt style. How dare they? On a side note, I find it funny when people bring up the whole CalArt style stuff and they say like every cartoon nowadays looks the same. And then meanwhile, you look at a lot of 80s cartoons and it's the exact same thing. Every 80s cartoon looked exactly the same. History repeats itself. Time is a flat circle. It doesn't matter anyways because both art styles suck. I believe in 2000s thick outline, sharp edges supremacy. Thank you very much. I think like maybe DuckTales and The Simpsons were the only good 80s cartoons, and that's it. The Simpsons barely even counts as a fucking 80s cartoon, which that just further proves my point more than anything else. The 80s truly were devoid of good animation. We needed those first three Nicktoons to happen. We really did. We needed Rugrats, we needed Ren and Stimpy, and we needed Doug. We needed these three shows to all premiere on that one fateful day in August of 1991. This was something that needed to happen. This was a canon event for animation. If it weren't for these three shows, cartoons would very likely still be dog shit in the 90s like they were in the 80s. Of course, there were dog shit cartoons that came out in the 90s as well. The 90s was a significantly better decade for cartoons than the 80s, but we did get trash cartoons in the 90s as well. But there were a lot of great cartoons as well. and I'd say the great outweighs the bad. There were more good cartoons than bad. 1999 might be the greatest year for cartoons ever. SpongeBob, Ed, Edd n Eddy, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Family Guy, and Futurama would all premiere in 1999. Just like that. 5 banger cartoons in the same year. Now, some of you could use the logic that I used with The Simpsons earlier and say that these barely count as 90s cartoons because they came out at the very end of the decade. And okay, yeah, maybe that might be true. But even if you exclude these 5 shows, there were still a lot of great cartoons that came out in the 90s, more so than in the 80s. And not to mention, these 5 shows could instead be used as proof that cartoons in the 2000s were amazing, which they were. But I'm getting off topic. I apologize for that. Let's get back on topic. We needed these first 3 Nicktoons to happen in order to ensure that a cartoon like Rubik the Amazing Cube could never come out in the 90s. What the hell is Rubik the Amazing Cube, you might be asking? Why, it's none other than the topic of today's video. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with what a Rubik's Cube is. It's the cube with all the different colored squares, and you have to sort out the cube in order to have all of the sides be the same color. So like you have one side that's all red, one side that's all blue, one side that's all yellow, that sort of thing. Everyone knows what a Rubik's Cube is. Now let me ask y'all something. When you look at this thing, do you think to yourselves, man, this would make for a great cartoon. I want this to have a cartoon. This would make for a banger cartoon. Chances are, no, none of y'all would say that. Anyone would look at this and think, this would not make for a good cartoon. How the hell would that be possible? And yet somehow, just somehow, those corporate bastards in the 80s, they somehow found a way to make a cartoon about a Rubik's Cube. Allow me to introduce y'all to Rubik the Amazing Cube. And yes, that is what the titular Rubik looks like. Dear God, are we in for a ride tonight, boys? Rubik the Amazing Cube is a short-lived cartoon from 1983 that only lasted 1 season and 12 episodes. The show suffers the same problem that Hammerman had, where there is backstory to this show, there is lore to this show. However, all of it is explained in the theme song. There's no episode that's dedicated to the backstory of this show. You would think it would be the pilot episode, but no. When I started watching this show, I saw the first episode was a Halloween episode, and the cube was already with the 3 main kids of the show, and I got really confused. I thought, okay, why is that the case? I was skeptical as to if I was watching the first episode or not, but it turns out I guess I was. I would have thought the first episode would show how these 3 kids managed to get this cube, but nope, never mind. It's all explained in the theme song, which I cannot play because of copyright reasons, but I'm just gonna say it is exactly as cheesy as you would expect the theme song for a corporate slop 80s cartoon about a Rubik's Cube to be. So on a mysterious night, there's this carriage that has a treasure chest in it with the titular Rubik, a magical Rubik's Cube that, when sorted together correctly, can come to life. The carriage hits a bump in the road, causing the treasure chest to fall out of the carriage and break. 3 kids, Reynaldo, Carlos, and Lisa, find the cube. They sort out all the colors correctly, and the cube comes to life. And so throughout the show, these 3 kids go on all of these adventures with this cube. This cube has magical powers. No, it's never explained how or why he has these magical powers. He just has them. Because 80s. And they use Rubik to stop different crimes from happening. And that's it. That's the premise of the show. Now, I'm sure that some of y'all are gonna look up and watch this show yourselves because of this video, and then you're gonna come back to me and you're gonna be like, this doesn't seem so bad. Why do you consider this search for the worst cartoon material? This doesn't seem all that terrible. Well, allow me to explain. Not every cartoon covered on the search for the worst cartoon can be a nut shack. Not every cartoon can be a Slim Shady show. not every cartoon can be a Patty the Pelican. I don't consider this show Search for the Worst Cartoon Material because it's poorly made or incompetent or anything like that, because it has morally reprehensible, offensive stuff in it. It doesn't have anything like that at all. This is a competently made cartoon. And just from looking at the show itself, like the contents in these episodes, there's nothing morally reprehensible about it. I consider this Search for the Worst Cartoon Material, though, simply because of what it represents, what this show means. I consider it Search for the Worst Cartoon Material because of the idea of this show and its existence. This cartoon perfectly captures the very corporate slop feel that a lot of 80's cartoons had. As I mentioned before, a large majority of 80's cartoons were just glorified toy commercials disguised as cartoons. And I think this show right here is the biggest offender of that. It's based on the Rubik's Cube, for God's sake. I don't think I've ever covered anything as creatively bankrupt as Rubik the Amazing Cube at any point during this series. To be honest, I'm surprised it has taken us this long to look at one of these corporate slop 80's toy commercial disguised as cartoons on this series. I feel like we should have covered one of these cartoons, if you can call them that, a long time ago. But whatever. Better late than never, as they say. The inevitable has finally arrived, and that's all that matters. The underlying message of the show is just buy Rubik's Cubes, and that's it. This whole thing is just a ploy to get kids to go to the store and buy Rubik's Cubes. That's all that this show is. And it doesn't even make any sense for this show. Why a Rubik's Cube of all things? You know, you look at something like Transformers or G.I. Joe, and they fit the same criteria of being toy commercials disguised as cartoons, but at least they kind of make sense. A kid could look at Transformers and they could be like, oh my god, that's so cool, you know, cars that can turn into robots, that's so cool. Mom, Dad, can we go to the toy store and buy a toy Transformer, please? You know, it makes sense. It's still not good, but it makes sense. Why in God's name would you do this for a Rubik's Cube of all things? What kid watched this show in 1983 and thought, damn, I want to get my hands on a Rubik's Cube? Mom, Dad, can we go to the toy store and buy a Rubik's Cube, please? Like, no kid is gonna be like that. No kid was like that, I guarantee you. And I want to imagine a lot of kids probably stayed away from this show because of how horrible the character design for Rubik is. If you're gonna make a corporate slop toy commercial disguised as a cartoon, maybe have the main gimmick of your show be cute and marketable and whatever. Instead, you have this little gremlin thing. It's awful. I hate it. The main reason I consider this Search for the Worst Cartoon Material is because of the idea behind it, because of the concept behind this show. It perfectly captures the toy commercial disguised as cartoon feel that a lot of 80's cartoons had. Just this very creatively bankrupt corporate slop created by businessmen who just want money, and that's it. But looking past the show from a conceptual standpoint, and instead focusing on the show itself, it's still not very good. It's still not very good at all. The first thing I'm going to bring up is another one of the big reasons why the 80's was a dark time for animation, particularly for cartoons, is because I don't know how much sense this is going to make, but there's just this sort of lameness to a lot of 80's cartoons. Like, a lot of 80's cartoons have this very, like, lame feel to them. And I think this show perfectly captures that lame 80's feel. You know, people talk about the 80's and whatever. It's like, there's cool 80's and then there's lame 80's. Using music, for example, it's like, cool 80's would be Blue Monday by New Order. and then lame 80s would be We Built This City from Starship. Now sometimes there's like this weird meta thing that happens where it's like you have something from the 80s that's undeniably lame, but it's also kind of good because it's lame. Like you look at glam metal, for example. I don't listen to glam metal. I would never willingly listen to glam metal at all. I find it to be an amazing coincidence how the first three Nicktoons ending off the corporate toy commercials disguised as cartoons of the 80s, and Nevermind by Nirvana making grunge and alternative rock the mainstream rock music, ending off glam metal. I find it amazing how these two things only happened a month apart from each other. The first three Nicktoons were in August of 1991, Nevermind September of 1991. Like, that is an insane coincidence right there. But getting back on topic, with glam metal, it's like, it's lame, but it's also kind of like, you can kind of enjoy it because it's lame. It's enjoyable because it's lame. You kind of embrace the lame cheesiness of it. Like, I would never willingly listen to Livin' on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. I would never call it like a great song or anything like that. It's lame and it's cheesy, but it's also kind of, you know, kind of charming because of that. It's like a weird meta thing where sometimes lame 80s can be enjoyable because of how lame it is. And Rubik the Amazing Cube is not like that at all. There's cool 80s, and then there's endearingly lame 80s, and then there's lame 80s. And this right here falls into the third category, just like that. The whole time I'm watching this show, and I just get this feeling of like, God, this is lame. This sucks, man. I'm so glad that, like, we got Ren and Stimpy, and, like, you know, cartoons became good again, you know. I'm so glad we got that, because I cannot imagine having another decade of crap like this, seriously. Thank God for Rugrats, man. It's times like this where I have to remind you all that someone out there grew up with this show when it came out in 1983. That is something that is so easy for me to forget, and it's like every so often I bring it up. Every so often I suddenly remember this, and it's like every single time it's like, damn, it gets to me. There are cartoons that I've covered on this series that someone out there did grow up with. Hell, there are cartoons that I have previously covered on this series that I personally grew up with as a kid. And I want to imagine Rubik the Amazing Cube over here is not exempt from any of this. The funniest thing in the world to me is the idea that there's probably like a grown man watching this video, and he's getting really angry at me because I'm disrespecting his beloved childhood cartoon. I could very easily see that person commenting down an angry message, getting mad at me, saying like, how fucking dare you disrespect my beloved childhood cartoon. This was my favorite cartoon growing up as a kid, and I will not tolerate any disrespect towards it. You're just a spoiled Gen Z kid who's jealous because the cartoons you grew up with were absolute crap in comparison. And you know what? You're right. I'm sorry for not growing up with the absolute masterpiece, the absolute work of art that is Rubik the Amazing Cube. I'm sorry for growing up with Ed, Edd and Eddy, and Danny Phantom, and Phineas and Ferb, and all of these other cartoons that are very clearly inferior to the masterpiece that is Rubik the Amazing Cube. How dare I? Seriously. Okay, but on a serious note, there's probably like someone that's gonna come across this, and it's like I'm sure like anyone that grew up with this is gonna look back on it and they're gonna be like, damn, this aged like milk. But it's so funny to me, the idea of someone who still believes that this is like a great show and whatever, and it's their childhood nostalgia completely gaslighting them into thinking that this corporate piece of crap is actually good. Well, I'm sorry, but it's not. Now, I didn't have very high expectations for this show. I mean, what exactly was I expecting from a typical corporate slop 80's toy commercial disguised as a cartoon? In this case, the Rubik's Cube. What could I possibly expect from a cartoon based on the Rubik's Cube? Well, I don't know, but I sure as hell wasn't expecting this show to be really f***ing boring. This show only lasted 12 episodes, as mentioned before, and every episode is only 20 minutes long, and I swear it feels much longer than 20 minutes. Every episode felt like a slog to sit through for a multitude of reasons, which I will go over right now. For starters, Rubik as a character is not only ugly, but he's also boring. We've already established that he is a magical cube with different powers, but the thing is, he is overpowered. He can do anything, and I mean anything. He can make people fly, he can grow people's feet. Yes, this is an actual thing in one of the episodes. He can turn a chicken into a f***ing egg. Yes, this is an actual thing in one of the episodes again. As a matter of fact, this is from the exact same episode as the feet one. He can turn people into animals, he can give people superpowers, he can turn into a hot air balloon, he can make it snow, he can do God knows how many different things. And this is a bad thing for a lot of reasons. This prevents the show from being fun or entertaining to watch. This character is too powerful. He's overpowered. And as a result of that, it's not fun to watch him. Any potential conflict, any potential tension that this show could have, it's not there, because anything and everything in this show could very easily be immediately resolved with Rubik's powers. It prevents the show from being entertaining because the tension is practically non-existent, and all of the conflicts can very easily be resolved in a few seconds, thereby making the show feel very predictable. Oh no, there's a conflict that's happening. It doesn't matter because in a few seconds, Rubik's is gonna solve it. Not only does it make the show boring, not only does it remove any tension from the show, but it also makes certain moments throughout the show frustratingly stupid, because it's like, yo, you have this overpowered cube. A character gets into a problem, and sometimes Rubik doesn't immediately save the day, even though this cube can do quite literally anything very easily. There were several moments throughout this show where it felt like I would very easily have my own shoot them with the dehydration gun moment, if you know what I mean. The only sort of weakness that Rubik has is he stops working when his colors get mismatched, and by extension, this means his powers stop working on anyone that's affected by them. So anyone that's flying because of Rubik immediately stops flying once he gets mismatched. This happens a lot of times throughout the show. In every episode it happens. And it's like, that's it. That's the only weakness that this character has. It's not that it's a bad weakness, it's the fact that it gets really stale after a while. It becomes very repetitive, having this be the only sort of conflict throughout the episodes, the only sort of tension. And this ties into another big problem with the show. It's very repetitive. Almost every episode feels like the exact same thing. Almost every episode has two villains in them. It's never one villain. I don't know why. You have a villain and you have his sidekick, I guess. And almost every episode, it feels like these are just the same characters copy and pasted. I'm not expecting great, amazing villains from a Rubik's Cube cartoon, but it feels like they're just cookie cutter characters copy and pasted into each episode. There's nothing to make these villains interesting or memorable or noteworthy. There's nothing to make them distinguishable from each other. They're all just the exact same characters with a few differences here and there. They all have the exact same goals. They all just feel the exact same. They all act the same way. A lot of them want to try and steal something. Granted, what they want to steal varies between episodes, but generally it's the same principle, and it makes the show not very fun or entertaining because it's just the same thing every episode. This is a 12 episode series where the episodes are 20 minutes long, and it feels much longer than that. It felt like I was watching one episode 12 times. There's an episode of the show where Rubik and the three kids enter the world of Alice in Wonderland, and you would think, okay, the Queen of Hearts is gonna be the villain in this episode, right? Something that would be different from the other villains of the show. And you would be wrong. Because guess what? The Queen of Hearts is not the villain of this episode. Instead, the villain is this giant, which I guess he's a little bit different from the other villains, I don't know. And his two small henchmen who are no different from the other villains on the show. Now, I don't know anything about the original story of Alice in Wonderland, but I really doubt that there was a giant at all in the story. They might as well have just made the episode Jack and the Beanstalk instead of Alice in Wonderland. Instead, they went with this like weird hybrid of the two, with most of it being Alice in Wonderland. Why not have the Queen of Hearts be the villain of the episode? I don't get it. That would be something a little different. And then sometimes you have episodes where you're just really confused at first as to who the villains are supposed to be. There is a Christmas episode. Yes, a Christmas episode. And I guess to give the show a tiny bit of credit, it's different from your other like typical Christmas specials. The show follows Rubik and the three kids and their parents who, I'm just gonna say, god damn it, that is an absolute dilf right there. Look at that fucking mustache, man. They go to visit their grandmother who lives out in the desert. Okay. It's different, I guess. Very interesting. And the grandma plans on celebrating Christmas in her small town by giving toys to the kids that live in the town. However, there's these two random teens that appear. You have this greaser and then you have this other kid, and they steal the truck with the toys. And you would think, okay, they're the villains of the episode. And then they nearly fall off a cliff only to be rescued by these two other guys who, as it turns out, they're the villains of the episode. The two teens end up giving the truck to the two villains, and they notice that the truck is full of the toys. How the hell did they not notice the toys when they first stole the truck? And furthermore, the show makes it look like they're stealing the truck because of the toys, but that's not the case at all. They meet up with the main characters and they claim that like if they saw the toys, they wouldn't have stolen the truck. Well, okay then, why did you steal the truck in the first place then? These two characters have no reason to be in the episode at all. You could very easily cut them out of the episode and have the two villains of the episode steal the truck from the very beginning. Instead of having this stupid, pointless thing where you have these two teens stealing the truck for some reason, and then they nearly fall off a cliff, and then they get rescued by the two villains, and they steal the truck, and then the two teens notice, oh no, they're stealing the toys, and it comes off as really bad writing. It's so needlessly complicated when they could have just very simply had these two villains steal the truck from the very beginning. The only like noteworthy different villain character in these episodes is this bully who appears in, I believe, 3 of the 12 episodes. There's an episode of the show that I guess I'd consider the best episode of the show, which isn't really saying much because it's like a 3-4 out of 10 at most, but I think it's the best episode just because it's something a little bit different. You have Reynaldo, the oldest of the 3 kids, entering a dirt bike race, hoping to win it while wearing his lucky helmet. His lucky helmet ends up getting stolen by this bully character though, who I'm just gonna say, I'm pretty sure this character is supposed to be the exact same age as Reynaldo, or at least like similar. Like they're both meant to be like teens, you know, maybe like 15, 16-year-olds, I don't know. And yet this bully character looks significantly older. He looks like he's in his in 40s. I think it's like this wrinkle that's on his face. I don't know what this is, but like he has this like wrinkle on his face that makes him look significantly older than he should be. If you remove this wrinkle from this character design, it would look younger. So I have no idea why he has this wrinkle. Also, I initially thought this was an animation error, but no, I guess it's not. For whatever reason, his teeth are brown and not white, and I don't know why. I thought this was an animation error, but no, every time he appears throughout this show, his teeth look like this, and I don't get why that's the case. The fact that his teeth appear like this every time he appears in the show makes me think it's not an animation error, but then that just raises even more questions as to why they look like this. It's weird. But anyways, this bully character steals Reynaldo's lucky helmet, and so it's up to Carlos, the boy with the yellow shirt, and Lisa, the girl obviously, and Rubik, to get the helmet back. It's not a great episode, but you know what? At least it's something different from the rest of the episodes. Every episode follows almost the exact same formula. You have these two villains that are trying to steal something, or they're trying to do something bad or anything like that, and these kids end up coming across it, and so they try to stop it, and then Rubik comes in to do all of the work. Most of the time it feels like the kids don't really do all that much. Most of the time it's Rubik that does all of the heavy lifting, and then Rubik gets scrambled up from time to time, and that's basically the only sort of tension or conflict within the episode, but it gets resolved very quickly, and so they stop the bad guys and the episode ends. Rinse, repeat. It gets very boring very quickly. So you know how I mentioned earlier that all of the backstories surrounding this show comes from the theme song and only the theme song? Well, that's not entirely true. There is an episode of the show where we meet Rubik's original owner, an evil magician. The episode starts off with Carlos running away from his family for stupid reasons. Who gives a shit? Honestly, they end up at this train station where they come across this magician who Rubik reveals to be his original owner. It is never explained if the magician created Rubik, if the magician made Rubik have all of these magic powers. It's just never explained at all. Again, he just has these powers because 80s. And according to Rubik, this magician wanted to have Rubik use all of these powers for evil. Luckily, the magician ended up losing Rubik as a result of what was previously established in the theme song. And the three kids meet up with Rubik, and yeah, you know how the story goes. This does raise the question of who this character is supposed to be. This character appears in the theme song, and he never once appears in any of the episodes. He doesn't appear in this episode, nor does he appear in any of the remaining 11 episodes. Who is this guy? Is he affiliated with the magician? The magician ends up finding out about Carlos and Rubik, and he plans on getting Rubik back. And then the predictable, formulaic episode structure comes in. The three kids and Rubik stop the magician. There are moments where Rubik gets scrambled up and Carlos comes in to unscramble him, and they end up stopping the bad guy. Or did they? Because the episode ends with the magician completely disappearing, leaving behind nothing but a top hat. And it makes you think, okay, maybe this is going to be further explored in another episode. Nope. That's not the case at all. This is the only episode that this magician appears in. And furthermore, this is the only episode that delves into Rubik's backstory, albeit not in very great detail. I can't help but feel that I'm asking for too much out of this corporate slop 80s cartoon. But god damn it, if you're gonna have lore in your crappy Rubik's Cube toy commercial disguised as a cartoon, at least go into detail about the lore. Damn it. After suffering through the mind-numbingly boring Bucky and Pepito, I went into Rubik the Amazing Cube expecting something a little more interesting, a little more noteworthy. I was delving into new territory after all. For the first time, we're looking at 80s corporate slop. A toy commercial disguised as a cartoon, and a pretty blatant one at that. But alas, this show ends up committing the worst sin possible. It is boring. This is not a funny bad cartoon, nor is it offensively bad. It is just mind-numbingly boring to sit through. Not only is this show awful from a conceptual standpoint, but it's also pretty bad from an execution standpoint. It's very repetitive and formulaic and derivative. All of the villains in all of the episodes are practically the same character, copy and pasted. There's no reason to care about any potential conflict that happens in these episodes because Rubik will almost immediately resolve them, which removes a lot of the potential interest that this show could have had. It has that stink to it, that 80s stink to it. It has that like very lame stink to it from the 80s. It's lame 80s, but it's not even like endearingly lame 80s, you know? Something like the TMNT cartoon could be like, it's lame and cheesy, but it's also kind of enjoyable because of that. No, that's not the case at all for this show. This is just lame 80s. And it's also just not a very fun or entertaining cartoon. This isn't the worst cartoon that I've covered on this series, but it is definitely in the lower half. Really now, I feel like I should rank this show much lower just because of how abysmal it is from a conceptual standpoint. If there was one cartoon that I would point to showcase how awful and corporate 80s animation was, it would be Rubik the Amazing Cube. No doubt about it at all. This show perfectly represents everything wrong with 80s animation. Is there anything good for me to say about this show? Well, I guess there's a few okay things. The theme song is probably the only endearingly lame thing about this show. Everything else is lame 80s, but this theme song is endearingly lame 80s. Again, it is exactly as cheesy as you would expect a theme song for a corporate slop 80s toy commercial disguised as a cartoon to be. The animation and the art are fine, I guess. I mean, it looks like an 80s cartoon. It looks like every single 80s cartoon. Very generic, uninteresting art style, but it's not awful, I guess. With the obvious exception being Rubik himself, who might have the worst character design I have ever seen in any cartoon ever. Or at least the worst character design I've seen in any cartoon ever that's not from Vivzy Pop. And finally, speaking of Rubik himself, I want to keep this part as brief as possible, and I really hope this doesn't come off as disrespectful in any way, considering the fact that Rubik's voice actor passed away in 2012. But Rubik is surprisingly not as obnoxious as I would expect him to be. Is he ugly? Yeah. Is he boring? Yeah. But is he annoying? Surprisingly not really. Rubik does have a high-pitched voice, and it's surprisingly not super annoying. I guess it's not high-pitched enough for it to be, like, really obnoxious. Like, if it was f***ing Fred Figglehorn or something, Alvin and the Chipmunks or whatever, then it would be a completely different story. But surprisingly, the annoyingness of this character is kept to a minimum. That being said, there are a few moments where this character can be pretty grating. Almost every single time Rubik gets scrambled up, he starts making these like gibberish sounds. I don't know how to describe it. It kind of sounds like he's laughing, I'm not sure, but it's just these like gibberish scrambled sounds, and I don't know what the hell it is, but it just annoys me to no end. I'm not sure why. It just does. But besides that, Rubik is surprisingly not insufferable as a character. He's boring, he's overpowered, and he's hideous, but you know what? He's not obnoxious, at least. Also, this was apparently one of the first ever cartoons to primarily have Hispanic Latin American characters in the main cast, including voice actors as well, which, My condolences to anyone in the Hispanic or Latin American communities. I'm sure most of you are probably happy to know that one of the first ever pieces of representation that you got in animation is this corporate 80's slop toy commercial disguised as a cartoon. This show that has this creature in it, and it only exists to sell Rubik's Cubes to stupid children. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I don't think all representation is good representation. I'm just saying. First the Filipinos get screwed over, and now the Hispanics and Latin Americans get screwed over. God damn. Y'all deserve better. Seriously. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like it. If you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see y'all next time. Adios.